First National Band 101. It's not a band, it's a concept. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, I can try. It's pretty pedantic. Which way do we want to go with it? Do we want to go arts and crafts, or do we want to go, Harvard 101? We got to...
Well, it's funny. Last time we were talking, and a lot of these songs were intended to be monkey songs. You wrote them for the band.
Well, I wrote them while
you were with the band.
In the Monkees, yeah. And then I wasn't writing for the Monkees because I've never been able to write for anything. Haven't been able to, I would not make a good journalist or a chronicler of stuff like that because I can't do that. And so when it came time to, here, write this song like you think Perry Como would sing it, my answer was always, who? You don't mean the guy from the 50s television 15-minute shows that sang, yeah, him. I couldn't write. Well, write it more like a pop. Tommy James and the Shondells? No. As well, pop music like you hear on Top 40 radio. And what I was listening to was the music on my own stereo system, and the music on radio was dominated basically by the Beatles and the early Beatles stuff. And so the definition of a pop song became mysterious to me. I couldn't tell what they meant by a pop song, and I'd say, well, how about this? And I would play them different drum. I'm only saying that not because different drum became a hit, but because everybody kind of understands what it is, and that's the way I write music. And I said, will this work? And they said, oh no, that won't work. And so I was flummoxed and I was stopped, and I thought, well, then the mind started turning, and this goes to the conversation we can have right now, which is, well, what's the musical base for this band, this mysterious fictional band? Because by that time, I walked in and they said, we have this band, it's called the Monkees, we'd like you to play in it, and it has a television show associated with it, so you'll need to perform, if you ever performed, and you'll have to look good on camera, and we can see how that works and so forth. And if you'd like to be in this band, we'd like you to do that. So I came in with the ideas, okay, well, this is a band. They need somebody who can play guitar. Sadly, that's not exactly me, but I can do my best. And they need music, and I can write some songs like different drum, and I can do this other kind of stuff. And without exception, and I really don't want to get too far down this road because it's a little more political than I want to get it down, but without exception, they kept saying no, 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 no. They being Bert, Bob, Steve, Ward, Jim, name after name after name, Kirshner, Brill, all of those guys kept saying, no, that is not pop song. That's not a pop song. And that shut me down because it was like, well, that's what I write. I wouldn't know how to write any kind of other song. I don't know. And it was tried. There was an effort made to explain it to me, and they said, "Well, it's, you don't want any twang in there because twang sounds kind of ignorant to the upper Northeast, and while it may be, appealing to the lower Southeast, they really like hee-haw, and so hee-haw is not where we want to go." I don't think hee-haw was on at that point, but that's my, right. I'm just making a point with it. And they had this sense of regionality, and the way they'd put the band together is one guy's from the Northeast, one guy's from Southern California, one guy's from England, and another guy is from the South, from Texas. And so we were cut to put into that mold. And then as we began to express ourselves, express the character that we thought we were playing, with the character that we had naturally to us, that was my only option because I wasn't really a trained actor. When those sort of things all came into play, we pushed up against the edge of the entire concept itself. Right. And at that point, I started thinking, well, then what is this thing? Because we're right in the ring with the Stones and the Beatles, and by that I'm talking about the size of the effort. Yeah. The Beatles were international multi-million, and the Monkees were international multi-millions, but not from the same platform. The whole music scene was burgeoning, mostly in England, and it was producing some of the best music of its time. And it was due to this rising sense of what constitutes a critical path. Let me see if I can get this right, because I'm getting into definitions, but what constitutes a critical path for a band? In other words, what defines the band, what makes it turn into a band, why is it a band? All those questions and all those answers had to come into play in order to start a band, and none of those questions were asked, and none of those questions were answered in the show, the Monkey Show, and all of them were asked and all of them were answered in the British invasion, revolution.
Right.
And in my case, the Beatles. I was an ardent, focused Beatle fan because I loved the way they wrote songs. John and Paul wrote songs. So in there was buried, you have to answer the question of not only how are you going to do what you're going to do with the band, but why are you doing that? What's the focus? What do you want to do? Why are you singing this song about this subject right now? Why are you singing I Want to Hold Your Hand, which is, at best kind of pop fluff, yeah, but rendered in such a way that you knew something was up. And wow, listen to those voices, listen to those harmonies, listen to that melody structure, all that is non-trivial. And maybe I Want to Hold Your Hand is a little silly, but it wasn't when you heard it on the radio, and it wasn't when you heard it delivering, because it was delivering to a focused element, which was, how do they look? What do they wear? What's their hair like? What are they doing? Are they going to play concerts? Are they going to play dance halls? Are they going to play the Cavern? Who are these guys? Why are they doing this? And I don't know who started to define all of it, because there were as many bands in England as there were people. I mean, everybody was in a band. Right. And, the Beatles was one of them, and it was skillfully managed so that it kept emerging. They were releasing records, every one of which would go to #1, and they would bounce up. But what was bouncing up was this concept, this sense, the Beatles. And if I was to write if I was to do a report or, a grant thesis or a grant work on the Beatles, I don't even know where I would start. I know a little bit about a rock and roll band or a band of people that make music, and almost nothing about a band of people who play soccer. But they're all the same dynamic.
Sure.
It's all a band.
It's a band. And
everybody plays their role. So nobody was doing that at the Monkees, but they were doing it at the Beatles. And I was writing to that, what happens when a band plays as a band? What happens when you have bass, guitar, piano, synthesizer, kazoo, and rhythm? And what happens when that ensemble comes together and they start to make music? What kind of music do they want to play? In elementary school, when you're 7 years old, the first day of school, and they sit you down in the music room and hand you something that makes noise, clatter, 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 they don't teach you any of that. And they didn't teach me any of that in my high school and my elementary school or anything. What is the core element of a band? And the answer is so obvious and so easy, I guess it's just, assumed that everybody knows. The answer is music. So it required an understanding of music that was outside the technical constraints of the understanding of music, a spiritual understanding of music. Do you ever walk along on a nice day and you're happy and have a melody start playing in your head? Well, of course you do. Everybody does that. Is it a melody you've heard? Maybe. Did you hear it on the radio? Maybe. Did it just pop into your head? Maybe. All of those things are happening, and if In my situation, I was surrounded by music all the time in my thinking and just where I saw it. And once I discovered the roots music of Texas, I began to understand where that music was coming from. That was country blues, and it was out of the Southeast and some out of Nashville, and marrying, you know, there on the Texas Gulf Coast and up through Houston and coming up through Austin, and making itself known in that way. And it had, by virtue of that, it had a personality. It had a raison d'etre. It had a reason to be. People danced to it, made love to it, made babies to it. There was a presence. It was on every car radio. Mm-hmm. There weren't really radios in homes at that point. The only radio I knew was in a car. And the radio that I knew at home was in the kitchen that would read the news to my mother as she got ready for work. This was before Top 40 radio. And the one in the car was playing DJs like you saw in American Graffiti. Hello, and we're 27 minutes after, and that kind of thing. And you had that sort of DJ presence in there that was clatter and clutter to me. But at the bottom line, it was music, and music, you know, was rhythm and tone and everything else. But it went through that in my mind, I realized, you know, I'm not understanding something here that I'm going to understand in time's future. So just keep your eyes open and your ears open and listen and see what it is. And it wasn't too long after the Monkees that it began to dawn on me that what is critical path is the reason to do it. Why are you doing this? What is it that you're delivering to the people who come to see you? Well, because it's a good time. It's an evening noise. It's all that kind of thing. But for me, it was a deep spiritual sense that was unspoken and unsung unless you wrote it and sang it. I had to write it and sing it, so I did that. And that's embedded in the lyric of the songs that I wrote.
Right.
When I rolled all that in to the powers that be at the Monkees, they said, well, we don't. First of all, we don't like it because it's twangy and it's country and it sounds like you're stupid. And second of all, we don't know what you're talking about. This is all acid flashes, and it's just because you're smoking a bunch of dope and you don't really know what you're talking about. But really, what had happened is I had just stepped off into the other world that these guys had discovered, and I was saying, wait for me, wait for me, wait for me. And it was to distill that environment into song and sound and music in my head that I worked. I thought, I gotta render this in poetry. And I don't know how to do that. I can start singing, but I don't sing all that good. And a lot of people made their way because they sang good. And a lot of people made their way because they played well, like, you know, played. But mostly, it was because they had something to say. And in my case, and I think in many of the cases of the people in the 60s, the guy who had the most to say was Dylan. And it whipped my head around. I thought, I've never heard that on Dick Clark. I never heard that at school. And, the songs that he was writing were just, they were to the pulse of the times. And I realized he was singing as the Pied Piper. Well, that's the wrong metaphor. But as the enchanter of his generation, who gave us all a voice. And God bless him for it. And I sang his songs. I sang all of them, and I tried to sing them like him back when I was, 11. But that's not going to happen in the Monkees, and that's not going to happen really any place in southern Los Angeles. Where it's going to happen, it's going to happen when the band coalesces, and what do they coalesce around? They coalesce around the music. So you have to start with the music. Well, what's the music about? Well, most of the time it's about love songs. What about lost love? What about the death of a treasured parent or grandparent or child? What about death in general? What about sorrow? What about high lonesome? What about all these things? Are they rendered in song? Well, yes, they are. And I was watching the Beatles touch that. And I was watching Dylan give us all a license to do it. And then it dawned on me, as these things were like a continuous sunrise, was that that's not just the reason to do it, it's critical path. You have to do it if you're going to make music. You've got to have something to say. You have to say, my heart is broken. Really? So's mine. Why is yours broken? Well, they didn't have my favorite malt lager. Well, okay, maybe that's trivial. Why did yours break? Well, because my girlfriend ran off with another guy. That was Gary Shandling's joke. I broke up with my girlfriend because she moved in with another guy. It makes me laugh to think about it now. And so there are these unspoken, unsung ideas that we live by, that when they are sung and when they are spoken, energize me and lift me up and make it possible to make it through the next 15 minutes. So now I'm done with the Monkees. I'm on timeline. I'm out of work. And I'm back to being this guy from Texas, this guy who can't play very well, this guy who warbles rather than sings. But I figured, I got a lot of license here, you know. I mean, I can, you know, Dylan didn't sing all that well. Although I loved the way he sang, you know, which sure wasn't, you know, Perry Como. Or Mitch, who did we decide it was? Mitch Mitchell? Mitch
Miller?
Miller, yeah.
Yeah, Mitch Miller.
There wasn't the Mitch Miller singers.
Yeah.
There wasn't any of those things. It was completely new, and it was coming from England, and it was coming from the Stones and the Beatles and from Hendrix, who was ours, if you want to do nations. What was all this stuff that was coming in? What are you going to do? Because you're already informed, and they tell you you can't sell country music and you can't sell this. It doesn't mean anything, doesn't make enough music, and besides that, it's stupid.
The steel guitar. They didn't like the steel guitar.
You figure it was a steel guitar?
Yeah.
Well, I know that my mother pointed that out. I don't like the way that guitar just goes and swirls. Sounds like the lady in front of me in church sings the hymns. And I understood that, but I also saw, in my own sense of it was, well, actually, these things are a touch of the infinite in this music. And if you expand that, you're expanding the spiritual side of it. So John Ware, who was the drummer for the First National Band, and John London Keeney, who was the bass player for the First National Band, were friends. And we talked about this. Well, what would the band be? And they both will say, well, just do what you do. And in my mind, I just told you what I thought I did was not sing very well, not play very well, not write very well. So I thought, well, that's not how you start. But they were both, no, what you're doing there is different and it's useful. And I had a friend of mine who would drive me around from time to time, and he would say, those songs that you sing are great. He was English. He said, those songs that you sing are fantastic.
And the cats in Nashville thought they were fantastic.
Well, by the time I got there, they sure did.
Yeah.
And played them for him, and they said, man, this is good stuff. Who wrote this? And I was happy to say me. And I was so far on the outside of the traditional Hollywood business and the Nashville business and anywhere the music centers were, because I was seen as being a rebel. I was against the success of the Monkees, which was not true, and that I was against the songs that they were making, and so also, which was not true. What was true is that I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't music that I liked. It wasn't music that I listened to.
Yeah.
But it was all fair. That wasn't my job. My job was not to like that. I didn't want to, impress Stockhausen on an unnerved world. I wanted beautiful music wherever I could find it. And if that was in a supermarket, that was okay with me. Or an elevator, I didn't care. But if I wanted to sing it myself and write it myself, I had to have an understanding of what that music was. So the first place I looked was in my own history, which was hillbilly, country. And then I started looking at the other kind of influences. Where am I going to find the stuff that I really love? And as I've written in my book, where I found it was in Bo Diddley and his rhythms, and where I found it was in the blues, and not so much in country music, except as it was rendered by guys like Hank Williams and so forth, and Jerry Lee and Johnny Cash and those, you know, the big guns, the big lions. And I thought I can fly in that flock if I can, you know, not to compare myself to them, but you know, they're not doing aerobatics that I can't do. I can do that. That sounds pretty good to me. And from that began to be, well, why don't we get, you know, country players? And who's the first guy you want to guess? Well, Red Rhodes. He's the steel player down at the Palomino, and he's the guy that I want. And I talked to Red, and I realized Red was not anywhere on this page. He was a very conventional country steel player. But he had these wild swings. And I turned him on. I think we talked about that already.
Yeah.
And once he got turned on, those wild swings became just magnificently wild. They went crazy off the charts. And he was playing out loud what I was hearing in my head. And the band slowly began to play. My band, First National Band, started beginning to play what we were hearing in our heads as a collective. And that's when a band really starts to come together, in my mind. It's when everybody hears the same song in their head. You call it different things. We're on the same page, we're playing the same song, so on and so forth. But everybody is of one mind about where one should be, what key it should be in, what instruments it should be, and so forth. And within it's a lot of room. And you saw the Beatles really, you know, venture out into these extraordinary territories. And I thought, well, I can do that too. And so it wasn't so much I was inspired by the Beatles, but I was certainly inspired by the tenor of the times and
Sure.
people who were doing it. Everybody from, this side of the pond to that side of the pond. And it was a great time to be in music, in a band, looking for some place to play. And I had this weird appendage called television that was starting to follow me around and, you know, give me an introduction into wherever I went, whether it was a restaurant or a grocery store. And so it was weird for me, but the four of us, John, Red, me, and Johnny, kind of had a focus on saying something's coming out of this, and let's continue to play it. Let's see how it will go. But it never got the commercial traction that I wanted it to. And I was watching the Monkees records get huge commercial traction, and I thought, well, those guys know something I don't know. And always when that thought would come into me, right behind it would be, that's nothing you need to know. Let them know it, let them go make the music. You need to know how to extinguish a cobalt fire. You need to know something very arcane. You're after something here that only certain people get in this door. And if you don't know how to extinguish a cobalt fire, don't set it on fire. And so I pulled back from that and moved to another thing where it was organically based. It came from someplace inside, not from someplace outside, where you say, oh, let's play it like they play it. Let's play it like he says it. Let's sing it like she sings it. Let's dress like her. Let's get a lead singer that's cute and short, or cute and tall, or black, white, or pink. Whatever it was, let's do it. But it was all coming from the outside. and turning on the inside, you turn back in on this, what's really pushing this music. And for me, I wanted it to be my means of livelihood. And so the idea that it would be the First National Bank, which is where I kept my money, and turn it into First National Band made perfect sense.
Sure.
Stash it there, and it's a good joke. Well, it's maybe not a good joke, but it's a joke,
Yeah.
or a funny joke. So that's the way I leave it when people ask me about it. If you have a point of view, and if you can render that point of view in your art, photography, painting, musicianship, then you've got two of the elements that are combustible. Get them together in a room, raise the temperature a little bit, and you're going to have warmth all the rest of your life. And that's what the First National Band is to me. It's the expression of those ideas as a band. Now, the Redux, well, that's a whole other thing, because Redux is 50 years after the First National Band. And it is the First National Band with new players, people who come up who can play better than we could ever play. And this new album that we've just made, Redux, is the best album I've ever made. I can say it unequivocally. I hope I'm not saying it foolishly.
The songs were the best I've ever heard of.
Well, see,
Yeah.
and it was for me too. I thought,
Yeah.
oh man, that's great. Who wrote that? You did, Nez.
Yeah.
Really?
It's like times have caught up to you. And times
Something,
have caught
yeah.
up to...
I feel it. I know what you're talking about. I don't know how to describe it any way other than you are, and I don't think I want to spend too much time trying to figure out how to describe it, because it takes me away from the focus. I could see a future for this band. I can see something really great waiting for us to go out and, you know, play a stadium and play a country and do that kind of stuff, because the music has that kind of sustenance to it, and the players are just amazing to work with. And you listen to it. I've never been happier with a record, and never been more proud and happy to get it out in front of people and to take it and give it to people. It's right now it's at the top of my form. This is the best I can do. So if I die now, that was it, guys.